Frankie Davis, the youngest daughter of the woman in question, called from Texas to offer more details. The story Michelle and Frankie told me was this. Leoma Patterson, Michelle's grandmother and the mother of Frankie Davis and 3 other grown children, went missing from the town of Clinton, Tennessee, about 20 miles north of Knoxville, one night in October 1978. She left a bar with 2 men, a father and son, and was never seen again. 5 months later, some kids playing in the woods beside Norris Lake found part of a human skeleton. Animals had scattered or eaten many of the bones. The ones remaining on the wooded slope included a skull, some ribs, a couple of long bones, and part of the spine. The hair mat, which had sloughed off the skull as the scalp decayed, lay nearby as well, along with a tattered dress and a turquoise ring. The remains had been examined by Dr. Cleland Blake, a medical examiner who served several East Tennessee counties. The bones had come from a middle-aged white woman, Dr. Blake concluded. Given that Leoma Patterson was the only missing person in the area who fit that profile, he tentatively identified them as hers. Frankie Davis, brought to the Campbell County Courthouse by Special Agent David Ray of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, identified the turquoise ring as Leoma's. It wasn't an airtight identification, but it was the best they could do, given the condition of the remains and the lack of a more definitive means of identification. Leoma Patterson had no fingerprints on file, but even if there had been fingerprints on file, the remains had no fingerprints, no fingers at all, nor even hands, thanks to the ravages of time and the teeth of animals. Leoma Patterson had no dental or medical x-rays on file, nor were there other identifying skeletal features, healed fractures, for example, that her family could recall. The mystery of how Leoma Patterson had ended up dead, dumped on a wooded hillside, remained unsolved for more than 5 years. Meanwhile, Dr. Blake had held on to the bones, against the possibility that the case might take a turn or investigators might get a break someday. And indeed, both of those events came to pass. In 1985, a great-nephew of Leoma Patterson's, Jimmy Ray Maggard, the younger of the men she'd left the bar with that night, confessed to killing her. They had quarreled over a drug deal, he said, and Maggard, 19 at the time of the quarrel, had struck his 56-year-old great-aunt with a tire iron. Maggard pleaded no contest to voluntary manslaughter. The case was closed, and the skeletal remains were finally buried in September 1985, beneath a heart-shaped granite headstone inscribed Patterson. But Leoma's children, 3 daughters and a son, were never completely convinced by the medical examiner's report, never entirely sure that the identification was correct. Over the next 2 decades, they would often wonder whether those really were their mother's bones in that hillside grave. Eventually, as their own children, Leoma's grandchildren, grew up, a new generation heard the story of Leoma's death and heard the nagging doubts about the identification. By the time Leoma's granddaughter Michelle listened to me lecture in chemistry class, she'd heard the question countless times over the years. Is it really her? Meanwhile, during the years since Leoma's disappearance, forensic science, especially techniques for human identification, had changed dramatically, thanks to a revolutionary new tool in the forensic toolbox, DNA testing. The DNA revolution had begun half a century before, in 1953, when 2 scientists at England's Cambridge University, James Watson and Francis Crick, solved a puzzle that had baffled geneticists and chemists for decades. What was the structure of the immense protein molecule that encoded every person's unique genetic fingerprint, developmental blueprint, and biochemical operating instructions? The answer, which Watson and Crick deduced from micrographs taken by Rosalind Franklin as she fired X-rays through crystallized specimens of the molecule, was elegant but surprisingly simple. That protein molecule, deoxyribonucleic acid, commonly known simply and mercifully as DNA, was shaped like a microscopic ladder 3 billion rungs high, its uprights tightly twisted into the corkscrew double helix, which is now one of the most familiar shapes on Earth. The breakthrough insight won Watson and Crick the Nobel Prize in 1962. It also paved the way, over the next 3 decades, for the development of analytical techniques capable of isolating any individual's unique genetic fingerprint. But the path from laboratory capability to real-world applicability isn't always swift or smooth. Prosecutors learned this lesson the hard way in 1995, early in the forensic use of DNA, during the murder trial of O.J. Simpson. Despite DNA evidence strongly linking him to the murders of his wife